By the way, we're going to be doing an advanced training in January. So if anybody's interested in that, be sure to let me know. Andrew, count an amount because I'm going to have to lock things down here shortly. How many folks are coming? Okay, if that makes sense. So we're doing a very short Christmas story today, and this Christmas story is not from the Gospels, which is probably a little bit interesting. As most of us know, prior to Jesus being born in Bethlehem, which is just outside of Jerusalem, which is in the country of Israel, uh, the Romans had come in and conquered the land, uh, several years before. So at this point, they're kind of established. They are a world power, and even prior to the Romans, there was another group, Alexander the Great, and the Greeks that had settled in Israel even before that. And was really interesting because even though the Greeks had been kind of, kicked out a while back, if you look at some of the Jewish history in Scripture, uh, the language was still very, very prevalent throughout the region. As a matter of fact, the Koine Greek was kind of the English of its day, right? And you might even say American English of its day. It always amazes me when I travel, uh, unless I'm in a French speaking country. Usually, all the signs are in English, and most of the instructions given by flight attendants and anybody else is done in English first, which is just weird, right? I mean, it's just strange. But that we have become the Greek of the time of Christ, where that's the trade language that's spoken around the world. And because of the Roman government being who they were, uh, I mean that it's amazing. If you go to that part of the country today, they still use roads that the Romans built, like every day. You know, we've got roads here that they built last year that you need four-wheel drive to travel on, right? Because of all the potholes. And the Romans built roads 2,000 years ago that are still functioning. So they provided a way for transportation. They had their military everywhere, so things were peaceful in a way that they hadn't been previously in history. Just a very just a very unusual time in history. And that kind of leads us to and also we're told in Luke that the law was in place up to John the Baptist, right? That the age of the law existed up till John the Baptist, which that was a neat little tidbit that I just found in my daily Bible reading the other day. I was like, wow, all the times that I've gone through Luke, it kind of jumped out at me.
Does that mean John the Baptist and the time he was baptizing, or John the Baptist at the time he was like born?
That's an excellent question.
See that bookshelf behind him? It's got the answer.
It's a very, very good question. And I would guess, now this is not thus saith the Lord, all right? But I would guess probably his birth was kind of the symbol, the sign that the things they were a changing. So, and there's even debate, about all that. And it depends a lot on the flavor of the theology that you are swimming in. That there's a lot of transitional There's a lot of kind of transitional things going on all the way through the book of Acts. So, but here's our story from God's word. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, that he might redeem those who were under the law, and that we might receive the adoption as sons. And that's our story from God's word, right? So it's short. I'll get it here where I can see it in the camera. So, but what happened? Do you remember the
Fullness of time.
Yeah, the fullness of time had come. Who?
God sent Jesus.
Yeah, God sent his son. And then there's an interesting little expression.
Under the law?
But yes, he does say that. But even before that, born
Born of a woman.
of a woman under the law, like you said, Sarah, to redeem those who were what?
Under the law.
Yeah, who were born under the law, that we might do what?
Be adopted.
Yeah, we might receive the adoption as sons, right? And there's our story from God's word. So, man, I just wonder what it might have been like for God, right? Who lives outside of time, right? So, which we don't really understand at all, right? We barely scratched the surface of okay, yeah, we know that's true, but we don't get it at all. But I wonder what it might have been like for God, that after all the history of the planet that had taken place up to that point, and the creation of the world. Well, first the fall of of Lucifer and the angels, and then the creation of the world and the creation of Adam, and presenting his wife to him in the garden, and then they messed up, and then you had started to see the consequences of sin all the time, and he worked with Israel, and Israel didn't want him as their king. They wanted their own king. I mean, just and it just seemed like it just spiraling out of control, right? And now all of a sudden it's time. What do you think that might have felt like for God? What do you think he might have been going through emotionally? Because God is a God of emotions, right? So as this fullness of time had come, what do you think might have been going on with him emotionally?
I think I don't really know if there's a word to describe it, but it's kind of like stressful, but not the anxious time, but kind of like just on the eve of a battle, that a battle commander might be wondering, we're waiting. We got the 3 minutes before the charge. We got there early. We're still waiting 3 more minutes. That 3-minute wait before the order goes forward to advance, and the artillery stops and everybody's shooting at everybody. I kind of feel that tense, pregnant moment of tense waiting.
Okay.
We lose Butch.
No, I didn't figure you wanted to watch me blow my nose. That's what I figured. So, I realize that's exciting, but not all that exciting. So,
my dad's
all right.
here.
Yeah, Cheryl.
I think of the word, I don't know, the word comes to me yearning.
Ooh.
I just think him yearning for those children that he really wanted to to adopt, to have as family with him. And so maybe he's like excited
Oh, okay.
that yearning is gonna be, fulfilled. Or, yeah.
All right. Well, let's look at this first part of the story. But when the fullness of the time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law. So, uh, so who's the initiator here of this action? What was that, Johnny? Sarah? God. Okay. Well, so yeah, okay. I see. Yeah, I see what you're doing there. Yeah, I got it now. Yeah, these obscure hand signals. I don't. Can't believe I missed that. Yeah, God. So, what might we learn about God that He is the one that is initiating this activity?
He's in control.
Oh, He's in control.
Yeah, I can't. How did I have one?
Oh, is that Dad?
Oh, okay.
Timothy, you might want to fix your camera when you get a chance. I think that he's the one that wants it to happen. God is the one that wants it to happen. He's initiating it.
Okay. He wants this to take place. All right.
Mhm.
Well, sent forth his son. And so if Jesus is being sent forth, I mean, do you see that being sent away? Like this is a change than what's previously been ever before in history.
This gear suit we gotta finish up. I can't finish.
So I just muted your family, Andrew. Sorry.
That's interesting because there is a change there. Where maybe not, because I guess there's some philosophical thought that Jesus come to the earth in different forms beforehand. But I think in a sense, there is, because he was born, he's incarnated now. This is a lot different than any other possible time he came.
Yeah.
So this is like full commitment now. This is like, yeah.
Ooh, I like that word.
This is a real game.
Full commitment.
What word? Full commitment, yeah. So God's showing his full commitment right now to this cause of sending forth his son under the law to redeem those under the law. He's making a full commitment to what his plan is or will be.
Well, when you hear that term fullness of time, what do you picture in your head? And excuse me, it says fullness of the time. It's not just time in general, but the specific time.
Well, naturally, the British baking show.
Of course, yes.
Because,
No reason to explain that at all.
because they're under real time constraints, these cooks. And sometimes they cook these things that are kind of thin. And so they actually sit on the floor in front of the oven so they can see the exact moment, when it needs to come out of the oven.
Ah.
So I see it as like, this is a precise thing. It's going to happen at this exact determined time.
Well, I like that.
And all
He's
eyes
sitting there waiting for it too.
all eyes are on it in heaven, and they've been waiting.
Yeah. So when the fullness of the time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman. Right? So I just find that an odd. I mean, isn't every baby born of a woman?
Can I go back to the fullness of time for a minute?
No. Of course we can.
I kind of look at it, and I like what Diane said. That's really interesting, that exact moment when the cake should come out. I kind of also think that it's kind of like there's two things that I have. It's kind of like a basketball team waiting for those final few seconds to score that last basket to win. Or kind of like almost a trap that was set where it looks like you're in total disarray, and the people are the enemy's advancing forward right into your trap. And as soon as they're in there, that's when you're going to set the trap. And so, and having said that, all these other things occurred to God, the fall of humanity and all of the other problems that we did as people. And so here's you would look on the outside and you would say, this is the absolute worst time for God to send his son when an austere government is controlling the world. But I mean, God is kind of setting a trap here for what he considers to be the perfect time, where it looks like he's going to lose big time. But no, it's all under I got it. Trust me. I look at other stories that we've done. It's always that one moment of crisis that is the determining factor. Whether or not things are going to happen, whether Paul and his friends are going to be saved from the shipwreck or whatever else happened in the last second. So this is God, I think, setting that trap. The fullness of time is this, as this is the time when it's all going to come to pass.
That just makes me think of something.
What's that?
That God sent a sunlight to come. When there was an obscure time going on, and when everything was going crazy, and I know that what the Bible talks about all of this crazy stuff is going to happen before she comes back. And right now, the Pope is talking about the one world government, which is really crazy. So who knows? God might be coming back like really soon.
Well, in our story, Andrew, what you brought up, we look at, and I'm sure the Jews looked at their situation. Man, Rome's in control, yada yada yada. But what would be some of the positive things? The fullness of time. So, what might
you
be
mentioned
positive?
you mentioned the language, that there was one common trade language that really helped. And I know that a dollar bill could be used almost anywhere in the world. Maybe not a 20 or a 50 or 100.
Yeah.
I know a $1 bill will buy $1 worth of whatever anywhere in the world.
Yes.
Any part of Mexico, you go $1 bill, you won't be able to spend it. You may not get the right freight for it, you won't be able to spend it. And so, there's some positive things in that. That there's a worldwide peace. I think you mentioned that there's a worldwide language and there's a worldwide travel system. So those are some positive things.
Yeah, so it's almost like he's setting up what's going to be taking place in the future, right?
Yeah.
After his son. So, but it's interesting. Do you think the Jews looked at the Romans being in control as, this is a thing of God? Or the fact that Alexander had come in 300 years before and dominated them so this nation has been dominated basically for 3 centuries by other countries. Do you think the Jews are going, oh, this is awesome, God's at work?
I think one of the things that's going on is it's now been a good chunk of time since the last prophet spoke.
Yeah.
And that can look like, well, is God still interested in us? We don't have any prophets. But it means that there's been a nice, good gap so that when the prophecies are fulfilled, nobody can say, well, y'all just anticipated that. You know, y'all were kind of, you had some good guessers on your team, because nobody can guess what's going to happen after a 400-year interval. So what looks negative, 400 years of silence and some nasty bit of foreign leadership in the meantime, is actually God setting it up.
Wow.
And I thought of that little silence. You old people will understand this. During the space, during the era of the manned space ships, you would have contact with the plane with the rocket as it left. And then there would be a period of silence. And then you would have contact again. And particularly when they come back, it's a little more dangerous because you don't have as much fuel, you don't have as much control. And so I remember nearly kind of, holding your breath a little bit during that window of no communication.
Yeah.
And then you hear that first word, and you're like, yeah, they're okay. They're going to splash in the ocean. It's all fine now. I think of Israel as kind of holding their breath in that window. And then when you hear that first word that you really identify, here's John the Baptist. And it's a go, Houston.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Let me.
You have to unmute yourself, Dad or Timothy. Can you hear me? There's a button there that'll show you how to do that.
There we go.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you now.
My comment would be, is in the beginning, God created man in his image. All right. Now coming the Son, okay, and saying born of woman is identifying that who he is, okay, that he is of God. He's born from a woman, identifying that he's not born anywhere else, but he's from a woman, identifying that this is an answer to the prophecy of God coming again, so that the Jews should understand that it's, God didn't create now as the Son. God is now born of the woman as a man, fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, which takes us back to a story we had done previously, so I can bring it in now. Of in Genesis, part of the curse against the serpent was that the seed of the woman, that he is going to crush your head, but you're going to bruise his heel. So the seed of a woman, that's an unusual expression. So I just wonder, do you see any comparison there to, or tie-in possibly to, here we have God sent forth his Son, born of a woman. Could God have made other choices as far as how his Son was delivered?
Born of an angel.
Coming down on a fiery horse.
Yeah. Or, and one of the things I thought about the other day is, and Andrew, you mentioned this earlier in our conversation. Jesus was only there for 33 years, so he could have been in a theophany, right? And just appeared for a limited amount of time, because he had taken on human form in the past, but now it seems he's taking on human flesh. Do you see it? What difference do you see there?
Well, again, man was made from the dust of the earth.
Yes.
What does theophany mean?
Theophany is an Old Testament appearance of Jesus,
Like the
uh,
angel of the Lord.
like the angel, yeah, the angel of the Lord. Anytime you see the capital A, in the story of the angel of the Lord with his sword drawn outside of Jericho, when Joshua, comes up to him and says, "Are you for us or for them?" And he says, "No," which I just love that story. And then Joshua bows down and worships him, and this angel does not stop him. Anytime you have an angel in Scripture that is being worshipped, he goes, "No, no, no." But in this instance, he accepts the worship and tells Joshua to take off his shoes because the place he's standing is holy ground. So that would be a theophany, an Old Testament appearance of Christ. Andrew.
Butch, what my dad said is kind of interesting there is that, this, there's no doubt that this is a fulfillment of the promises of God. And part of that full commitment now, we were fully committed before when we had these theophanies, these appearances. And the prophets that Diane mentioned, these were part of the full commitment, but now you can see that full commitment to the plan, that this is taking place. There's no turning back. There's no other plan. This is the plan, and it's going to work.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's move on to it. So, two different times in this story, it talks about, first of all, that his son was born under the law to redeem those who were born under the law, right? So it's a repetition, a repetition there as what's being said. So, what's the big deal about being born under the law?
Well, what does it mean to be under the law?
It's a good question.
There are over 600 different laws you need to follow. So it's easier to live by grace. And God realized that. So that he sent his son to save us.
Well, Johnny, you mentioned something. You said it's easier to live under grace. Is it possible to live under the law?
Impossible.
Yeah, I mean that's it's kind of the whole purpose, right?
I think that Jesus lived under the law, didn't he? I mean, he fulfilled the law. He was perfect according to the law. I think that's another place that's mentioned. But in reference to part of your introduction and the question that Sarah asked, if Jesus was born under the law and John was born 6 months earlier to Jesus, it did not start at the birth of John that the law stopped.
That's also what I was thinking too.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so anyway, to be born under the law, to follow fully that law, which Adam didn't follow, broke that only rule, the only law they had.
Yeah.
Here's Jesus, not only fulfilling the law as a baby when his parents offered sacrifice for him, but now fulfilling every aspect of the law, all of the moral code of God. Kind of showing it is possible. It's not just impossible, it is possible to fulfill the law.
Okay. Yeah, and I wonder if we might see that where it's stated in the story, God sent forth his son to redeem those who were born under the law. So what might we learn about God's stated purpose in sending his son?
To redeem the people.
Okay.
He cares about the people.
Right.
Are there people that aren't under the law?
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, if you don't accept Christ, you're under the law. And if you're Jewish, you're under the law. And if you don't, as far as I know, as far as the east is from the west, I have no sin. Because when I confess my sin to God, I have no sin. God shall send me as pure as white. The Jew, in other words, under the law, he's full of sin. You know, he's got to prove it that he doesn't swear, lie, commit adultery, all those things written in the commandments. I don't have to do that. God's grace said he forgives me.
Yeah, you're pulling in a lot of things, but I'm wondering in this passage if we're supposed to be seeing all people or a specific group of people.
I don't know. What do you guys think? What do y'all see?
Many are called, few are chosen. That's a scary thing when you read that, when you say that, few are chosen.
By trying to live by works, you're basically putting yourself under the law. So
Mm.
anyone, I guess, who's living not by faith but by works is under the law.
Okay.
Well, I try to follow an example of Christ. I don't live under the law. I just do what God would do. I try to do what he would do.
Well, since the Son has to do the redemption, right? The purpose was that the Son would redeem. What might that tell us about those who are under the law? If they could redeem themselves, would the Son would the Son have needed to come, or would the Son have needed to be sent? I think it's probably a better way.
The truth is that they couldn't redeem themselves because every day they wouldn't be sinning because they are living under the law. But living under grace is wise.
Well, let's look at that last part of it here, where it says, to those that we, and I love that part, that we might receive the adoption as sons. I find it interesting here because we've got God, right, in the first part of this story, who sent forth his Son under the law, born of a woman, that he might redeem those who were born under the law, that we, I mean, he gets real specific there, right, might receive the adoption as sons. So is this going beyond just redemption? I mean, what do you, what was that, Cheryl? I couldn't quite hear it.
Redemption and adoption.
Yeah, so both.
Yeah, I'm just, the thing about redeem those under the law, I'm just thinking about the Jews, I mean, because I know there's some places where it's talking about those who aren't under the law, if they do what the law says, it's like a law written on their heart. So I'm kind of thinking about, I don't know, this may be wrong, but, and I'm wondering if this scripture that you're using is toward the Hebrews, if he's talking toward the Jews specifically.
Well,
I know it extended to the Gentiles after that.
Let me time you out there, because and that's something I probably need to include in the introduction in this story, because this letter is written to Gentiles. Right?
Oh.
So the we here is not Jews.
Okay.
So that's a good, that just shows me in preparing this story, what might need to be included in my introduction. So that's one of the reasons I love doing these, in our discussion times. It's like, ooh, okay, that's important to have that in the introduction. So based on the fact that we are not Jews, but it's talking about we under the law, what does that tell us about who's under the law? What do you see there?
It looks like it's talking to everyone, Gentiles and Jews.
Yeah. Well, and being forgiven, redeemed, right? That's cool, right? That's not a none of us would go, oh yuck, no, I don't want to be forgiven. Yeah, but when you compare that to being adopted as a son or daughter,
That's cooler.
that's a good way. That's a good way to put that. That's even cooler. So, I mean, what do we learn there about God from the fact He's willing not just to forgive, but to embrace and share?
It reminds me of like the saying, you can forgive them, but don't forget what they did. And so there's still kind of that like remembrance of, and not like fully feeling welcomed. And
Yeah. Right.
my new job thing is calling me. I'm going to mute myself.
All right. So what else? I mean, what do you learn about the person of God from the fact that He goes not just? I mean, would it have been enough if He'd redeemed?
Well, something really interesting is that before Jesus came, like how my grandpa said earlier, it was impossible to live under the law. Well, when Jesus came, and he restored us, and he like involved us into a family. So now we have somebody who is able to defend us. Defend.
Yeah.
And that journey reminds me of my grandpa adopted many children.
Oh yeah, they would know about that, right? Yeah. Well, let's go kind of back to the first part of the story. We talked a little bit about the Jews when the Greeks had come in and kind of kicked their butts for a while, and the Romans came in and kicked their butts for a while, and they probably would not have seen, that God was involved in that. That they probably missed the point. I mean, today, is that still a problem for God's people that, God works in ways and through people that are really hard for us to accept? I mean, is that still an issue today?
Not at all. No. Never had experience with that myself.
Well, I'm curious. What in general, just what do you see that looking like in the world today?
It reminds me of when people like to just in general ask, well, how could a good God allow suffering? And, like, how could He allow a baby just to live for 8 hours and then die? And how is that good?
Yeah.
Or having leaders of countries that have pagan ideas, that immoral, and they're leading society down the wrong path. Yeah, you kind of think, what's going on?
Yeah, that reminds me of how my sister's friend believes that God appointed Trump as president. And my sister's like, well, how could that be? Like, like, that doesn't make any sense. But the Bible does say He appoints all rulers. Anyone who has any authority is because God gave him that authority. That's
Look up Daniel.
Yeah.
Well, and then you get to the other side of that, that people who are on the other side of that coin politically would go, well, Biden cannot possibly be chosen by God. And so you have these two sides who are both making the same argument. And that's just kind of hard to deal with as believers, right? I mean, anybody ever seen a pastor that did immoral things, and yet God used him in that's troublesome, right? Just to put it mildly.
Very true.
Probably one of the reasons why COVID hit.
But I mean, for me, honestly, I'm a crunchy conservative guy, and for me, for years, I really struggled in seeing God's hand in different belief systems within the faith, right? I'm not talking about like Hindus and Muslims. I'm talking about within Christianity. It was just really hard for me to go, no, God's not in that. It was really easy for me to go, God's not in that, because they didn't check off all my little boxes, right? And yet, if you look around the world, God has used people who are totally different theological perspectives than I am to do amazing works for His kingdom. We are having a 24/7 prayer time right now, and I just got through reading. There's a guy named Pete Greig who started the 24/7 prayer movement about 25 years ago, something, and it's just blown up. I mean, it's just based on what the Moravians did centuries ago, and I love what God has done through this guy. But in listening to him, there were points where I just wanted to pull my hair out, right? Because it's like, no, that's not the way this works. And yet God has blessed him and God has used him, even though he might not check off all my blocks. Well, how do you see this?
Definitely encouraging, though.
It is.
Like, in one sense, it's like, how could that be? That doesn't make any sense. But on the other hand, it's like, well, I certainly don't check off all the boxes, so that's good to know.
And see, even for those of us that do check off all the boxes, who have it all right.
Nobody checks off all the boxes.
Only Butch does.
But so how do you see this part of the story helping us in the future, helping you in the future? How can the fact that God works through goofy, weird, unforeseen, almost evil, right, from our perspective? And I want to be careful there, because that leans towards saying God is evil, but that's not what I'm saying. But that He uses things we couldn't imagine. So how could that help us in the future?
It's a good reminder. You can go
Okay.
ahead, Cheryl.
No, go ahead.
It's a good reminder that, like, if you're in a terrible situation, that's not the end of the story. There's a way God could use it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, and following along that, it could be that God is setting up something better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and honestly, I do think sometimes we tend to look at better being here, and sometimes the better is there, right? Because we'll be there a lot longer than we'll be here.
Oh yeah.
Thankfully.
Well, even though our there will be here, but here will be different and more like there. But that's a whole, that's a whole nother ball of theological morass that we can get into. So, all right. Well, thank you guys. I've kept you over a few minutes. I apologize for that. This story is in Galatians 4, 4, and 5, and it's this is really an important passage when you're dealing with the Christmas story, because all these things happen for a reason at the time that they happen. So, and next week we'll talk about the worldwide census and some pretty jerky rulers that God allowed to be in control, right? And so.
So you're gonna be talking about King Herod.
Well, and Caesar. So, We won't talk about Bethlehem yet, as far as the killing of the babies. But let me go ahead and stop the recording here.